Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Tough Friends Collective podcast with me, your host, Chelsea Gomez, also known as Oh, You're So Tough. If you're new to this podcast, just a brief overview. This podcast is all about real, authentic, and genuine conversations around cancer. And most of the stories that we talk about here on this podcast come from either my own personal experience with cancer or my Instagram page, which is called Oh, You're So Tough. I hope everyone who is listening is doing okay. I'm recording this on the 12th of January, and there's a bunch of wildfires and things going on in LA. So I'm sending love and all of that to the people who are affected by the fires, especially if you're going through cancer, because obviously cancer is hard enough without adding other unprecedented times on top of it, which we have been having just the most of in the past 5 years or so. Today's podcast is going to be all about a question that I received from a community friend on Instagram. They asked a question, they wanted some feedback while remaining anonymous, and this topic is so kind of nuanced and all of that I thought it would be better tackled on the podcast. I'm going to go ahead and read the question that was put out to my followers from this community friend so we can hop into the topic. Okay, so it reads, "Hi, I've never messaged you before, but I love your page. I have an anonymous question for the Oh, You're So Tough followers. When you hear someone has died who has a similar type of cancer as you, how do you not spiral? I find myself obsessively looking up everything I can about them. I hate to admit it, but trying to see if mine is different somehow to give myself hope. I'm only about a year in, but this keeps happening. Would love some advice to stay grounded. Thanks." Before we actually go through the responses that the community gave, I kind of want to talk through this from my perspective. So, when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, I was 28. And I mean, nobody has cancer in their cards, but especially when you're a young person, you especially don't think like cancer is going to happen to you. So, I know for me, I dove into like Facebook support groups because I think that was mainly where people were talking about cancer. There really wasn't this online cancer community like there is now back in 2018, not of the same way. So I hopped into Facebook groups, asking questions. And at first, it was a good environment because you could ask questions, you could read about people's experiences. But very quickly for me, it became extremely toxic on my mental health. And it was for some of these reasons that this community friend is saying. So, one thing that somebody told me later on into like my cancer experience is that like people who remain in those Facebook groups a lot of times, not everyone and not every Facebook group, just prefacing this, but a lot of people stay there who aren't getting well, and the ones who have gotten well or, moved on from cancer or in remission, they're off living their lives. They're not staying in those groups. The ones who are still sick or who are still struggling are remaining in those groups. And so it's like easy to see those groups and think like everyone has the worst outcomes or going through the worst things. And the reality is, like, the people who are doing better, a lot of them have distanced themselves from cancer. So I know, like, when somebody would pass away or if I had a certain symptom, I would look through that whole group and, like, convince myself that I had whatever complication or whatever side effect. It must be happening to me too. And the reality is everybody's experience with their cancer is different, even if it's the same cancer. So you have to be careful when you get in those like echo chambers of those groups like that. I left mostly every Facebook group I was in except for maybe one, and that one or two maybe that have to do with cancer. And those are literally just because I know the people in the group from Instagram. It's not like I'm looking for support there. And those are different than the ones I'm talking about. I really am talking about the ones that are very cancer specific, like the Hodgkin's lymphoma group I was in. I think I'm glad that it existed when I needed it, but honestly, like, you would post about certain things and people would say, "Well, that's not relevant," or "That doesn't happen," or "This is blah blah blah." And it's like, well, you can't say that because you can't say that you know every single thing about every single person's experience or whatever. So, I do caution a lot of newly diagnosed patients about getting involved or getting too deep in those groups because I know how it is. Um, and exactly what this person is describing. Like, you are seeing all these bad things happen. You are convincing yourself it's happening to you or it will. And it's just not, for most people, a healthy thing to do. So, talking through that, how do we overcome it? How do we stop doing it? I know for me, it happened with time. Like with time, I stopped needing to obsess over these things because I was doing better. I think it's harder to separate yourself from doing these sorts of things when you're in the middle of treatment or you're just very early out because you're still just everything is cancer. Your whole life is immersed in it. And so it's hard to let that go. And it's hard to feel like if you don't look something up, like something's going to happen. Like I know for me, a big part of cancer and for a lot of people is the control piece. You don't have control over anything anymore. Well, doing obsessive research is something you can control. You can feel like you're controlling something by researching all these things. And the reality is you're not controlling anything. You're just letting yourself be controlled by like what ifs in the worst case scenario. And that is so hard to get out of or see when you're in the middle of it. We will now go ahead and talk through and read some of the community members' responses to this question because I think there's a lot of value in so many of them. If I don't get to your exact response in this podcast, it's not because I don't value what you said. It just may be too similar to what somebody else said or just yeah, it has nothing at all to do with the validity of what you said. So I just wanted to say that. This friend said, my cancer is 100% terminal, literally, brain cancer glioblastoma. So I hear a lot of death stories. When I need to ground myself, I focus on controlling what is in my control and knowing that I am doing everything I can to give my body a shot to survive longer. It gives me some peace. I have also recently left online brain cancer / glioblastoma specific groups. Hearing about the death from caregivers was starting to get brutal. That has helped. Very interesting that this first response that I pulled up is really similar to what I said, and really interesting to hear how other people feel similarly because sometimes I feel like I'm not talking down about Facebook groups or wherever you find your support. I'm so happy you have support. It's just you need to just analyze whether or not it's actually helping you. And that includes like the Instagram community. I love the Instagram community, but for some people it's too much and they need to take breaks or they need to step away from it. And that is valid. You can do that. You need to protect your mental health first. And however that looks, that is what you need to do. And there's no guilt or shame in that. I know a lot of friends I have, they're like, I feel guilty because I have friends here. And if I step away, then I feel like I'm leaving them. And it's like, you can still have your friendships without participating directly in the online space in these cancer spaces, I guess. You can still have your cancer friends, but they're ultimately your friends. It's not just all about cancer. I mean, with my friends who are my cancer friends, I think we talk about cancer, but it's not like the main thing we talk about. So I don't want you to think like you can't have your friendships if you need a break or need to walk away from some of these spaces, first of all. I really appreciated in this person's response how they said, they focus on what they can control, because that is what I was saying a bit earlier. It's like, what can you control? You can control what you look at. You can control, how you take care of yourself. You can control those sorts of things. But ultimately, we can't control cancer. We can't control the outcome of what happens. We can't control what happens to other people or how they reply to what's happening, but we can control what we do. And so I think like with the original question, if we know that what we're doing as far as like spiraling and looking through all of these things, if we know that that is not healthy, yes, we can control ourselves not to do that, but I know it's extremely hard. So like I said, once again, that's why we're talking through this. Focus on what you can control and what you can't. The next friend that wrote in, I'm not going to read their whole submission, but I am going to talk through part of what they're saying. So in this submission, they basically say, no two cancer diagnoses are the same. Each of our bodies responds differently to chemo, so stay focused on you in the moment. And they're saying that they've had the same chemo but reacted differently at different infusion times, and that they're actually on a more strong dose of chemo now, and they feel better on that than they did on the other one. And the whole point of what they are saying is that you can't compare your experience with somebody else's. I mean, you can, but the thing is, by doing that, it's only going to be at your detriment because that's the truth. Like, obviously, anybody else, that's a normal thing to look at other people and see their experience and see, like, oh, how is it going to work out for me? But the thing is, you really don't know how your body's going to react, and you don't know what your outcome is going to be. It's really difficult not to compare, your current situation with other people's, but it is true. Like, I'll give you just a short example. When I needed my stem cell transplant, I was given a choice. Do you want to start what's called ice chemo, where you have to be in the hospital for like 5 days? Or how many days was it? I think it's 4 days, maybe 4 days, and lose all your hair and like all these terrible things. Or do you want to try immunotherapy, which like you wouldn't be in the hospital and you lose your hair right away? Which one you want to try? Like, which one would you choose? Obviously, I chose the immunotherapy. Well, I did 3 treatments of that over 3 months and had a scan. And guess what? Immunotherapy that is so lovely and great for everyone else sucked for me because my cancer progressed. It was so surprising that even my like long time great new like my new he's not new anymore. My oncologist, which my second oncologist was like, okay, never seen this before, basically. So like I totally resonate with like this concept of, hey, not everyone's body reacts the same way. Your story's not going to be the same. Like my first oncologist was like, girl, you got the good cancer. Red flag. But like, no, it wasn't good. It wasn't good for me. I never really responded to treatment. It was always terrible. It always was getting worse. It came back. It just wasn't good. So the thing is, like, you could have the worst statistics or the best statistics, and things could work out differently than what something says on a paper or what somebody else went through. It can be totally, totally different. And I know, once again, it is very hard to see that when you're in the middle of it. But I think the more you can limit those places where you have access to that information, I'm not saying isolate yourself from the community, but like maybe don't search those hashtags of like the same people. Now, if it's your friend who passes away from the same cancer or even a different cancer, that's another conversation. We talked about survivor's guilt plenty of times. That's a little different. But if you're like, you can control to not seek out those additional things that may trigger you and really just focus on you and the present moment and what is happening. The next response says, this is tough because I think we all find ourselves unhealthily glued to the internet, searching for answers. It's a tough habit to break. But I stopped searching for symptoms, left all the Facebook support groups, and only exposed myself to cancer things on Instagram. Much more control over what I see. Now I look up bad videos or memes or just listen to one of Chelsea's podcasts. Thanks. Fill the time with something else. I know it's easy to say, but I know how difficult these habits can be to break. And I think filling your time with other things is a great point. And this doesn't have to be my podcast, even though you're listening to it now. Hi. But for real, like healthy habits that can keep your mind busy, like that's why I'm a big proponent, obviously, about creativity. You don't have to be an artist. You don't even have to do art. You can write poetry, write in a journal, make a video like diary that only you see. It's something else to keep your mind busy. Like some people like to do, diamond painting or paint by numbers or I don't care what it is, collage. Do anything that is just keeping you busy and you're not tempted. I mean, you'll be tempted, but you're not like 100% staying on the phone all day looking things up. You know what I mean? And I have been, honestly, I remember so many times when I've been like hours deep into Facebook groups researching things and just like crying, freaking out, telling my husband like it's all over basically for me. And once I removed access from that place, I couldn't go back there anymore to look around. And it was better for me. It was better for me to not have access, believe me. And it sounds like a lot of people come to that same conclusion, which is really eye-opening for me. Like, yeah, it really is. Like, it is validating to me, too, because I kind of felt guilty, like, it just like I told you earlier, like, leaving cancer spaces, I felt a little guilty. Like, whoa, I mean, I wasn't somebody who was doing what I'm doing now in these groups, but I still felt guilty because there were those people there. But I had to find somewhere where I felt safe and I felt like I could also heal while being in a cancer space and like that place, which was constant sadness and bad news and terrible things. I thought I couldn't thrive there. I couldn't heal there at all. And I want to read this one because I think that it's very similar. I didn't know how similar all these were, but I do want to read this because I think it does give hope. So it says, "Hi, sharing my own experience. I have stage 4 neuroendocrine carcinoma. It was accidentally discovered 10 years ago. At the time, all info available stated that people with my own presentation usually survived around 5 years after diagnosis. I am a nurse, and having access to scientific data was not a very good experience. I kept reading about people dying within a year of diagnosis because there weren't many treatment options. Heck, Steve Jobs died of one of these suckers, and I had 2 patients die from this during my nursing degree. So imagine my mind at the time. But the great thing I came to realize is that every and each one of us has our own path. We're all different. And although we might have the same type of cancer, they are not the same cancer. Neither are our bodies, our lifestyles, our mindsets, or our immune systems." They also go on to say, "After a few months, I actually stopped looking for survival rates and focused on what the science says that works, and it was actually a game changer. Also, as their oncologist always says, do not look at other people's experience. It is not yours." And it's true. We are all so different as individuals and human beings. No fingerprints are the same. Why should cancer be? And hey, here I am, 10 years later, still stage 4, not operable, not eligible for PRRT at my country, but living pretty well in spite of having less energy than most people I know, still a nurse, now also attending psychology at the university, 46 and going through premenopausal issues and dealing with carcinoid syndrome. Focus on your own path and celebrate every win, even if it looks small. Sending love and hope. I really wanted to share that one because I think it speaks volumes. Like right there, somebody who is a nurse and who is educated on like how to find statistics and research and all of that, which some of us are, some of us aren't, but they did do that. They didn't actually, it sounds like, flock to a Facebook group. They flocked to statistics and real black and white like treatment outcomes and all of that. And if they had just lied down and said, well, I guess it's 5 years for me, I'm not saying that they wouldn't still be here, but I'm saying like, I'm sure it helped that they got control of that and like stop focusing on the statistics and just focused on their personal experience. And I think that's similar, once again, to what everybody else has said and what I said in the beginning. Control what you can control. Limit social media when needed. Find safe spaces and don't seek out these things as much as you can. And then remember, like, especially to the original submitter, like, remember that you are, from what you said, only a year into all of this, a year into cancer, or even a year out of treatment, or wherever you are, like, even a couple years. I think that that is so early into, healing and dealing with these types of things. I just think it's important to, just remain present. I do want to tell you something that my old therapist told me. I probably said this before on this podcast, but it always resonates with me, so I like to share it. That, we can spend every single day worried about what might happen, worried about relapse, worried about complications, worried about statistics, worried about other people and what happened with them. We can spend every day like that. But you miss out on life as it's happening now if you do that. You really do. I mean, I have literally, like I've told you, I'm not proud of it, but I've sat there for hours upon hours looking at Facebook groups and then spiraling into oblivion. I have. Was that time really well spent? No. I could have spent more time with my daughter, more time with my husband, done some crafts, did whatever I needed to do. That was something that was productive and good for me. So I think it comes down to, self-discipline, which I'm just now learning how to get more of. But also, if you can't self-discipline, reach out to somebody that's trusted. Like, for me, I could say to my husband, hey, please make sure if you see me like Googling or doing whatever, call me out on it and not in a way that's like, you know, he's not, I'm asking you to do this. Like, I'm asking you to hold me accountable to not be sitting there for 8 hours Googling. Like, I need you to hold me accountable. And I think I did have a similar conversation with him. It's been a couple years now, so sometimes I forget, but I'm pretty sure I said something similar. And so it's like you have somebody or a buddy or a friend or maybe even a cancer friend that you can hold each other accountable. Like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, stay out of this place. Like, have somebody you can go to talk about these things without being in your head going down these rabbit holes, if that makes sense. Okay, guys, I think that this episode is kind of long already, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. There are many other people who replied, and I just want to say thank you for replying. I just read through a lot of them, and they're very similar to this. Limiting time in these places where you feel triggered, focusing on other things, and just realizing that your experience is your own. So I hope that it was somehow helpful to hear this. To the original person who asked the question, thank you for asking that question and opening up this conversation, because I think a lot of these behaviors and things are, they feel, for me, they felt shameful. I still, as you can see, when I'm like, "Ugh, I spent 8 hours," like I'm still a bit like, but I know that it's normal. It's okay that it happened. It's not, you're not a bad person because you look at these things. It's just that you got to start putting your mental health and yourself first and making some changes to get through it, because yeah, I just know, like, I have been there and I see you. And yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. If you do enjoy this podcast, please leave me a stars, all the ratings, all the nice things wherever you're listening. Also, my Etsy shop is always linked below if you'd like to support me. My Ko-fi link is there too. And no pressure though. I love you anyways. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.